the Council for Inclusive Education is a specialist council within the Alberta Teachers Association, we would like to start off our podcast with the ATA land acknowledgement. The Alberta Teachers Association acknowledges Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10 territories within Alberta. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations, including the many places that you are joining us from. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. We recognize the land as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territories we are residing on or visiting.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of our book club podcast on the Inclusive Chronicles, Tips and Tricks for Inclusion in Alberta. My name is Kelsey Bagnall, and I will be our host today. I am the communications officer for the CIE. I'll pass it off to Jennifer to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer LaCourse, and I'm the president for the Council for Inclusive Education. And I'm going to hand it over to Hannah.
I'm Hannah. I am the webmaster for the Council for Inclusive Education, joined today by my puppy, Ruby.
Welcome, Ruby. We're excited to have you this morning. And welcome, everybody. We are excited to finish our series on the station rotation and UDL by Dr. Catlin Tucker. And we're very excited to talk today about groupings. We're going to talk about some of our successes, but also some of those trickies or challenges that have popped up as we've implemented this across Alberta. And we're also going to talk about how we design some of our stations, especially our offline ones. And I'm going to kick us off because I'm going to start talking about designing the offline stations. So I teach grade 1. And so my students do primarily stations that are offline. Very, very purposefully in my classroom. I teach through play for social and science, but my kids in general have lots of screen time at home on iPads and tablets and stuff like that. So I very purposely designed my literacy stations this year so that they aren't online. We're not just playing games. I'm not using an iPad just for that. And so my offline stations are pretty much all offline. And so for me, in designing those stations, I always think about what is the goal for my stations. And when I use station rotation, it is during my literacy block specifically related to UFly. And so for me, my small group teacher-led station is differentiated based off of assessment on where they are in the UFly curriculum. And so my offline stations are all related to where they are in the UFly curriculum and what they're doing. And so the offline ones could be some of the UFly stations that UFly actually produces, like the roll and reads and the read and draw. But I also then supplement with other things. I'm an Orton Gillingham trained educator, so I have pulled lots of things from my Orton Gillingham training and made those into stations to really solidify what they're working on and what they've been taught. So the stations that I have that are offline for my kids to go to are never a new skill. It is always a repeated, and it is something that they have been explicitly taught in small group instruction. So that's how I design my offline stations. How about you, Jennifer, Hannah?
I use my station rotation in math, mostly because was always my I feel very less competent teaching math to grade 5 students, especially with the new curriculum in Alberta. Because I understand math, I can do math, but I really struggle with explaining how my brain processes everything that I'm doing. So for me, I was using it that way because then it was easier for me to differentiate and really work one-on-one with the kids and kind of like figure out where they were at after the assessments and then help them understand the different processes. So I don't do a lot of online stations either in my classroom because I do find that getting them offline for some of my kids that have like ADHD and OCD and all that, it's really tough once they get onto that preferred activity. It doesn't matter if the timer's gone, they need to finish their game or they need to do something. And it's like, I grew up in the 80s. My mom just powered off my Nintendo. It didn't matter. I lost all the stuff anyway. So for me, like that's always a struggle in the classroom. So I try to do offline. And so um, I'll do like collaborative stations where I have a big like word problem up on the board and the idea is to try to solve it or whatever and they can collectively solve it. And so if they don't solve it in the time, then all their work is still there and then people can kind of see it, but they have to like really show their work. And so I've taught them how to do all of that stuff. And then like just they have like different choose your own adventure worksheets and it's kind of like this or that or this or that. And they kind of go through and do those kind of things. And then sometimes it's just like dice games or like speed multiplication and all of that stuff. So like there's games set up, there's other things, but generally most of them are offline. But I do like the collaborative station where they like I have a bigger, more challenging thing for them all to work on because that brings in a lot of talking and working together and then when we're finished then I go through and show them all how to solve that problem and like some of them are like oh that's what I missed and they kind of pick up on things so yeah that's what I do. Hannah.
I love that. I use the station rotation in my grade 8 math class. And one of the things I found with my grade 8, and especially planning the online station, it was always real world experience. Online was a more research type, where can you use this math in real life? But the offline, I found that my grade 8s were really needing more support in those sort of like number sense skills. I'm a big fan of gamification, and that sort of model lends itself really well to the station rotation. So I brought in different sort of number sense math games that my grade 8s could do when they are offline. So working on multiplication facts without having to do like you're just here's your sheet, answer the questions. So they could play games and work on those number sense activities to help build a better understanding of how they deal with numbers in the real world. My math class is scheduled weird. It was at the end of every day. So by the time we got to the end of the day, my grade 8s are done. They didn't have a whole lot left in the tank to give, and that's okay. That is perfectly okay. So my offline station was to meet them where they were at, to practice those fundamental skills when we're dealing with some of the grade 8 curriculum, like Pythagorean theorem, for example. If I'm working on that outcome, it was difficult to find an offline station that lends itself to independence, but focusing on those concrete skills made them the harder material more accessible and gave them a brain break at the end of the day. So that's how I designed my offline stations: gamified, number sense skills.
Oops, I forgot to unmute myself. Amazing. I love that. So I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer. Jennifer, I think you have our next question for us to talk about.
I do. So I think we talked about like how do we structure our groupings and how do we like make the groupings work and have them so that they're a little bit fluid throughout the year and not so like rigid and structured. So um I'll start first with what I've done in my math class. I also did it in my social studies class because we piloted the new curriculum and so I was like, well, We'll try it because I mean, if it fails, it fails. But it actually didn't. It didn't end up working too terribly. It worked not exactly how I pictured in my head, but it still got the job done at the end of the day. So for math, like we do an assessment, and in my targeted group, the kids are assessed based on where they're at. So it's a very targeted lesson for them. However, once they leave my group, they get to choose which station they go to. Like you're not here and then you're here and then you're here and you rotate around. Like I know that's sort of how they talk about it, except that I tell them like you get to go to two other stations after you're with me. And you can choose how long you want to spend at those stations. Just that, but when you have to come to me, then you have to come to me. And so then they kind of get to pick, and it's interesting to watch them because I'll have one part where everybody is at a different station and not with me, and I can go around and observe. And it's interesting how they're working together. And you'll see very mixed level groups, and then you see groups where they're the same and they're still working on the same problem, but they're talking to each other about the different strategies they use to solve the different offline stations and stuff. And then the games, a lot of the times it will be like a leveled game because it's not fun for a kid that is super fast at their number sense math facts to play math like multiplication war and win all the time because it's just that's not not going to continue to stretch their skills and stuff. So that it's interesting how they go and group together. And then when I was in social, I very purposefully set them up into stations that were mixed level groupings so that I could have like some of my artistic kids could be really good and show how they could recreate something, but the other kids could really explain what was going on and why it was important to the topic that we were studying. And so it really just built on strengths and stuff in that. And it was very strength based in my groupings that I did for that. And I think it is very important for teachers to consider what outcome you're wanting to meet and how your kids are going to be successful to get there. Because it's not about making the kids fail, it's about finding ways to make them successful at reaching that outcome at their entry point and stuff. So that's how I do it. Hannah, how do you go about doing your groupings?
My groupings initially were definitely skill based. I wanted to spend like the most amount of time teacher station with my kids who were lower in the concept that we were teaching. But what I was finding is as we were going through the groups, the buy-in was a little less. So an interesting thing is we stopped and I was like, okay, guys, how would you like to assign these groups? What are you thinking? So at the end of every sort of outcome, I would shuffle the groups and it would be friend based. So I would put peers together so that they had a connection in their group. After that outcome was finished, we would reassess and come together as a class. Did that work? Did it not work? And the reflection really surprised me with some of my students. It was like, well, I actually didn't do my best work because I was doing something else, or I found myself visiting with my peer more. So we always had a conversation about it, and then we would design the groupings together for every outcome. One time when we were doing our little classroom democracy discussion, they wanted absolute chaos. So we put everybody's names in a name generator and we generated groups. And that was one of the most successful groups I had because it was just pure chance. And I love a little chaos, especially with gamification in my math room. And my kids sort of pick up on that pretty frequently. So the chaos grouping was a buy-in. And it also left them feeling safe in a way in the chaos that this isn't someone picking on me. This is a random roll of the dice. And if I'm in a group where I'm not feeling really comfortable, I can experience that discomfort and learn to work through it and have strategies to work through it and know that the next outcome, the groups will change again. So we did lots of almost social emotional learning work with our grouping in conjunction with math.
I love
What about you? Yeah, it was lots of fun. It was like a little classroom experiment that they had all the buy-in and were so excited for.
Oh, I
But
love
how did oh, thanks. They loved it too. Sometimes it didn't work. And as an educator, even when on the council as a learning support teacher, not every strategy works every time, but you won't know until you try. I
100%.
can't imagine. Oh yeah, absolutely. Kelsey, what about you? What about your little groupings?
So, like I said earlier, I do this in my literacy block or one of the parts of my literacy for phonics. And so my grouping for the teacher station is based off of where they are in the UFly curriculum. So I have a group of students that are working what we would consider above grade level. And so that group I'm challenging them based off of where they are in the UFly curriculum and what the assessments have said. However, for the stations that they go to, they don't like transition and go as a group to each station. They have that agency in going, I'm going to go to this station today, and I'm going to go to this station the second rotation that we do. And what I really like about that is that agency. So those groupings that happen at the offline stations and away from me are mixed groupings all the time. And I switch out the type of stations that I have to do some of that stretching as well. Like you mentioned, Hannah, in that if I have a student that only ever wants to do a worksheet, I'm going to have worksheets available most days, but not always. And so that we can stretch, but it's in a safe environment and they know that it's low risk to take that stretch because it's only one rotation that they have to stretch through. And it's only a 15-minute block, or well, by the time we do all the transitions and all the funness, it's really only 10. But they are pretty good at choosing where to go. But it took a long time to get to the place where they could choose and have that agency because they needed that structure at the beginning, which I think it leads us great into Hannah's question for our
Oh
podcast.
yes, 100%. As we all know, we've experienced it as educators. We get really excited about an idea, and everybody thinks the world of this idea. One of the things that I think that is worth acknowledging is that this station rotation model is wonderful, and I really enjoy using it. But like with this model or any model that you try in your classroom, I think it's worth acknowledging challenges. If we don't take the time to acknowledge the challenges when they arise, people might find them unexpected or think that there's something wrong in their teaching practice if they're experiencing a challenge. If we don't talk about challenges, some people might not think they exist. So, in the spirit of talking challenges and then being proactive about them, what are some challenges that you experienced with the station rotation model, whether it's student readiness or time or classroom management? And I think I'm going to throw it to you, Jen. What's a challenge you experienced with this model? And did you overcome it or did you plan around it? I'm curious.
I think one of the things that um I had a challenge with was the online station actually, and having appropriate um resources and a setup for that. Just because when I'm at the teacher-led station, I can't be monitoring that the students are, and as much as you teach them and tell them those kind of things. And so because I felt like I had less control over it, and when I would look at like the analytics from like the websites that I was telling them to go on, and I wasn't seeing the results or the feedback that I wanted to see of the students actually engaging in those activities, I ended up taking the online station away and putting in more offline stations. And when the kids asked, I said, well, because when I go back and look to see what you did while you were on that station, there was no results. And so either you're going in there and trying to create your character and spending all your time doing that and not actually doing what you're supposed to. And so then I had to go back, and before I could reintroduce the online station, we had to really spend a lot of time teaching how that, what that looked like, what they were supposed to be doing, and all of that engagement, because and it becomes a very different kettle of fish, to use a weird saying, as they get older and as compared to the younger students and stuff. And so sometimes, like being in a K-5 school, the fives are our oldest, and you're like, oh, they know how to do these things, and you have an unrealistic expectation of your students because they're actually still little and they still want to do a whole lot of things. So I think for me, that was one of the challenges that came up, and like as a reflection on it, as I move into a new grade next year and will be bringing this into my classroom, it will be spending a lot of September just teaching the stations as a whole class and then practicing that, just that one station in stations as a whole class. But like everybody will be in their little station kind of idea, just to do that, a lot of that pre-teaching so that they're ready for it, and just slowly introduce new stations to the groups as we're going through and stuff. So I will pass it to Kelsey, and she can tell us about her challenges now.
So my challenge is pretty similar to yours, Jen, in that I teach grade 1. And so when I started the year and I started this off, my students, I had to play with it a lot. So originally I had thought I would move them around the stations very grouped together, and they would go in, and that didn't work for the students that I'm currently serving. And so I came back and I reflected on who they are as learners, what their strengths are, that type of thing. My class are a very chatty group of kids. And as a group, that is probably one of the biggest trickies that I had to explicitly teach. And so, because when I'm working with a small group of students and teaching that small group, I need the other kids to have a voice level that is not super loud. And so one of the biggest challenges, apart from the way I originally had them rotating and then reflected and changed, was that voice level. And really focusing on that explicit teaching of what the difference is between a silent voice and a whisper voice, and then a talking voice, because the talking voice in my classroom is like an outside voice. And so really explicit teaching, practicing the different levels, voice levels, so that everybody was successful. Because when the level of noise in the classroom, I was getting notifications on my watch about the decibels being too loud during station rotation. So for me, like that was a really big thing, was to slow down and really teach that. Also, I'm teaching 6-year-olds. And so the idea of being accountable to doing something when somebody isn't standing right beside you is incredibly a huge learning skill that we have worked on all year long. And I would not say we have perfected. I would say it's still a work in progress. And that's because they're 6-year-olds. And that's okay. But those are some of the big challenges. And I think for me, being able to sit back and reflect on how it's going and going, okay, this part is going really well, but this part isn't. How can I make a tweak in this part? It's okay to make tweaks, even though we've started one way, because when we give ourselves that permission to change something in our classroom because something isn't working, then it doesn't feel like we're doing something wrong all the time. Just because we started one way doesn't mean we have to finish the way we started. We can make those tweaks and make those changes to be successful as best as we can in our classrooms. How about you, Hannah?
I feel like my grade 8s and your grade 1s could get together and talk in their indoor voice volumes. For those who are listening, I am doing air quotes because I imagine the volume level would be the same. Some of the challenges that I found dealing with, like once you get into your higher grades, our content level sort of increases. So what I was finding was that my teacher station was almost like a bottleneck. I was running out of time to teach the skill or the outcome with my tools for differentiation without running out of time. So I had to really think about and hone in on the information that is required in the teacher station. Because what was happening is I was holding up. I was the problem. Hi, it's me holding up the rotation of the stations because I needed to finish teaching the skill or the outcome so that they would be successful with the practice or the online station. So